ladies and gentlemen, now hosting the RizzoCast, put your hands together for Steven Risotto!
What's going on, everybody, and welcome. My name is Steven Risotto. I cover the San Francisco Giants for SFA, and I'm the host of RizzoCast, a podcast that features current and former big league players, coaches, fans, media, and others who are regarded as some of the brightest mind around the sport. We are coming to you from the podcast studio inside the Golden Gate Express newsroom at San Francisco State University. Today's guest is Danny Vietti, the social media manager for CBS Sports, a noted NorCal product. Danny is a well-known Twitter presence, as well as the host of the Wake and Rake podcast with former big league infielder Will Middlebrooks. They do a really good job. I talked to Danny about all things MLB postseason, the teams he likes in the American League and the National League, the difference between the Orioles and Rangers and how they build their team, the unstoppability of the Atlanta Braves, and the possible weaknesses inside the Dodgers organization. We also touch on Danny's personal path, his baseball career, and his work on the social media aspect of managing all CBS Sports social media accounts. It's a great conversation. We had a good time, and it was definitely a pleasure to get a chance to talk to Danny. This is episode number 151, and let's get started. All right, we are back on RizzoCast with Danny Vietti, and Danny is nice enough to hop on the show the first one of October. Danny, what's going on? How you doing?
Good, dude. I'm just, pleasure to be on here. Pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to share all of my mistakes. So hopefully people can learn from what I did wrong, I guess, right?
I'm sure there's not many mistakes. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, we'll probably swift through maybe like one or two or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. But no, I'm sure there's not a ton.
But you're aging me, though, because I used to do podcasts and I used to be the same ages as the podcast host. Like, like the younger, the newer podcasts are like, oh yeah, I'm like, I'm 22, 23. And I used to be 22, 23. Now I just turned 27. And so now I'm like, shoot, I am kind of out of that younger era. Like once you approach 30, things start to change a little bit.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. I still have a ways away. Just want to let you know, about 9 years away from that. So, but you're scaring me a little bit. So, yeah. No, definitely. I wanted to get you on here because, the MLB postseason's finally here. And, by the time that this is released, the first games of the wild card series will be completed. So you'll know who kind of has the upper end in those matchups. But before we get into the postseason stuff, I do want to touch very quickly on a few players that were honored at the final game during the regular season in 2023. Some really good stuff. I'm going to throw these names at you, and you're going to give me kind of like what comes to mind when you think of these players. So I guess we'll start with Adam Wainwright in St. Louis. What do you think of when you think of Wainwright in the, he kind of had a great going out party, but really cool to see him walk out into the sunset the way he did.
Best breaking ball of the 2010s. That's probably the first thing that would come to my mind. And for him to be a low to mid 90s guy and then essentially resurrect his career while throwing upper eights, I always have an even greater appreciation for those types of players. Clayton Kershaw, similarly here at the tail end of his career. It's one thing to throw 95 your entire career and have a Hall of Fame career. It's incredible. I'm not trying to take anything away from it, but I have an appreciation, being a former pitcher myself, to completely change and alter your career and turn it on its axis midway when you're already successful at being what you do. I respect those guys to the nth degree, and Adam Wainwright falls into that category.
And I guess to some extent in the same category as Wainwright, in that he had to maybe evolve a little bit, and maybe he evolved way before Wainwright did, and way before maybe he could have. But Zach Greinke is another guy who was kind of, big power pitcher, but always still kind of a guy who could locate really well in the beginning. But Greinke with the Royals also walked off the field to applause down there in Kansas City. And who knows what's in store for him? I don't know if he announced his retirement yet. I don't think so. But what do you think of when you think of Greinke?
Chipotle guacamole, for sure. Was a few years ago. I mean, just the Greinke stories. I mean, he had one where it was him and it was the backup catcher for the Dodgers, AJ Ellis, and something happened with a mound visit and just Greinke antics. Like that's the first thing that comes to my mind. He had a comment about he never gets Chipotle guacamole because it's $2.50. So I guess that's the one antic that kind of stands out in my mind. Which
There's a few
because like
stories.
he has so many great memories of like his actual playing abilities. So like I hate that that's his legacy, but I kind of love it at the same time because it makes him a little bit more unique.
Yeah, he's going to be one of those guys that's going to have the Hall of Fame debate, and we're just not going to know what it is. Like, we're not going to know where to stand with Greinke because he is one of those like last generation, like a lot of inning guys, a lot of wins. But there's a few stories on the Athletic that I have bookmarked, and the Greinke stories is one of them. Like, I think the one you're talking about with Ellis was Ellis told him one day, like, Zach, we're in a bit of a funk right now. As much of a funk the Dodgers in the 2010s could get, right? And he said, we're in a bit of a funk right now. What do we do? Like, how would you improve our club? And Greinke told him, well, first things first, I'd trade you. It was like completely serious.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah, that's just the legendary Zach Greinke stories. What about Brandon Crawford? This one for those listening, there's some Giants fans that listen. I was there. I was covering his final game in San Francisco, possibly, I assume. What do you think of when you think of Crawford?
I've said this for years. We will not appreciate Brandon Crawford enough until he's long gone. He's going to be one of those guys that you look up on YouTube 5 years after he retires, 10 years after he retires. Kids are going to look up best shortstop highlight tapes, and Brandon Crawford is just going to go viral one day. Like it's going to be 2038. Brandon Crawford will be long retired at this point. A lot of people may have even forgotten about Crawford, maybe not in San Francisco, but across the baseball universe. And all of a sudden, he's going to go viral on TikTok or whatever social platform is available at that point in time. And like maybe it's AI just playing YouTube videos of Brandon Crawford, whatever it is in 2038. But when you look at his highlight tapes, it's unbelievably smooth. Like he had this highlight tape when he was in spring training one time where he was doing flippies in the shortstop position going in between the legs. He makes it look so easy, and which makes his highlight tape going to make it look so much cooler. So obviously the accomplishments that he had as a team, 2-time World Series champ, just being a good guy too. I got the pleasure of interviewing him and his wife. I think it was a year and a half ago on our podcast. Down to earth human, super good dude. But gonna have one of the greatest highlight tapes as a shortstop in probably recent memory.
Yeah, no doubt. And I made the mistake of going through like the MLB Instagram comments on Sunday, and they're like, yeah, Crawford, he's just some guy compared to all the other guys that are getting all these recognitions on the final game. Like as storied as the Giants franchise is, Crawford is fourth in games played in the history of the franchise behind Mays, McCovey, and Bonds. And then Brandon Crawford, like not a Hall of Famer, but I agree with you 100% that he's a guy that is very important to the Giants organization. A few more here. Joey Votto. I mean, Joey Votto's finale kind of went out in a very strange way, but I don't think I was surprised when I read that he had gotten ejected in possibly his final game in Cincinnati. He sent out an apology, but another guy who I feel is going to end up in the Hall of Fame someday, and we're not going to realize how good he was until maybe that day comes.
For sure. And his plate discipline is going to be what stands out to most people. And there's a debate out there of how much you should look into plate discipline, like how much should we value it? And in my mind, it's all about getting on base, right? And I understand driving in runs, picking up base hits. That's probably more valuable than taking your base on ball. But in Joey Votto's case, he was on base as much as some of the best Hall of Famers in Major League Baseball history. You look at his times on base in his career, he's up there with the DiMaggios and the Ruths. Like if you look at his on base numbers, I want to say it's top 15. I don't have the numbers in front, but it's like top 15 in the modern era. So his ability to understand the zone, I think he really like put another step forward into this age of getting on base, plate discipline, not swinging at the first pitch. like obviously the Oakland A's and the Moneyball thing kind of like started it, but Joey Votto was one of the first to really become like a Hall of Fame player while having some of the best plate discipline in baseball.
Absolutely. And if the goal is to swing at strikes, and I think he did it better than anybody. And then speaking of one hitter to another legendary hitter, and you know where I'm going with this one, the Miguel Cabrera moments, the clips from over the weekend were just so iconic, and he's someone that's going to be a no doubt Hall of Famer, first ballot guy, one of the best right-handed hitters of all time, really. What do you kind of take away from his career? I mean, he's the last guy to win a Triple Crown. Who knows when that's going to come next, but just a very significantly big career for Miguel Cabrera.
What stinks for Miggy is I have the most Northern California bias possible here. And actually what sticks out to me is Sergio Romo striking him out to win the 2012 World Series, Tigers, Giants. I think it was Giants swept them. So it was in 4 games. So that would have been
He's still looking for the slider, Danny.
Still looking for the slider, painted the 87 on the black there. So I feel disrespectful saying that. I mean, Miggy's, like you say, he's one of the best right-handed hitters of all time. Me, growing up Giants fan, unfortunately, that's the moment that's going to stick out for me.
Yeah, Cabrera takes strike 3 call, the call by Dave Fleming, and it's going to rain in my head, and I'm going to make you feel old here, but I was
don't do it.
Fifth grader when that happened, Danny. So just wanted to let you know.
Gosh, you just had to do it. You just had to do it.
Let's get into some postseason stuff here. Overall, do you get hyped up this time of year? I mean, when does postseason, like, what does postseason baseball mean to Danny Vietti in terms of like October starts, flipping the page on the regular season? What does this time every single year mean to you as a baseball fan?
It means more work, which is always kind of a catch-22, but it means more exciting work too. Like, this is what you look forward to all season long. So it means you're doing more podcasts, you're staying up a little bit later. Your sleep schedule is, pardon my French, completely effed. I don't know if bad language is allowed on this podcast.
It's absolutely allowed. Say whatever you want.
It's your sleep schedule is completely fucked. But this is why you play the game, essentially. And of course, we're not playing, we're covering the game, but there's nothing like playoff baseball, man. Like playoff anything is incredible, but playoff baseball, every inning it holds so much weight. Every play, every moment. This is, like I said, this is why we play the game, and it's great. It's in my opinion, it's one of the best times of the year. A lot because of playoff baseball, but also we're approaching that sports equinox where it's NHL, NBA, NFL, and MLB playoffs all going on at the same time. It only happens one time a year, and it happens here in October.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to touch on a few of these teams that entered through the wild card. Like the American League, obviously a lot stronger in that department with Tampa Bay, Texas, Toronto sneaking in. Texas plays Tampa Bay, Toronto plays the Twins. The Twins, who took advantage of a very weak American League Central division, and they got in with 87 wins. Just these teams alone, what do you think about that crop of wild card teams that are playing in this series, plus the Twins who won the division?
I think the National League is a little bit top heavy.
Yeah.
Especially with the injury to Brandon Woodruff. I was kind of riding the Brewers bandwagon here going into the postseason. The Brewers were hot in the second half. They had the third best record behind only the Dodgers and the Braves in Major League Baseball since the All-Star break. So they're right on the heels of the 2 betting favorites. But now that Woody's gone down, I've kind of soured on them a little bit. I thought that 3-man horse in a rotation of Freddie Peralta, Brandon Woodruff, and Corbin Burns was going to be really tough to handle. Now I'm not so sure. I still think there are those 3 teams, Dodgers, Braves, and Phillies, that have a leg up in the National League. American League, on the other hand, flip a coin. I think there are 6 teams that can all find themselves in the title game and are capable of hoisting a trophy at the end. I tried filling out my bracket last night on the Wake and Rake podcast with Will, my co-host. I filled it out like 6 different ways in the American League. I didn't feel confident about any of them. So I'm perfectly ready, or I'm very much ready to light my bracket on fire after day 2 and kind of throw it away into the trash can. Because I think the Blue Jays at the 6th seed, they had the best starter ERA in baseball. They're known for their offense, but they had the best starter ERA in baseball. The Twins have strikeout stuff, and as long as Royce Lewis is healthy, he's going to give them a chance to win. The Rangers, I mean, they were 1 game back of the Astros to win the West. which means they could have been the 2 seed right there. And then the Rays were the best team in Major League Baseball through the first 2 months of the season. And I haven't even mentioned the Baltimore Orioles, who are the number 1 seed. So I think the American League completely wide open. I have no idea who's going to win the American League. None.
Do you think the pennant still runs through Houston? Or is Baltimore? Because Baltimore, a lot of people are hopping on that bandwagon. 101 wins. I mean, a good young group of players, a core that is going to be there for a long time. They got some pitching too. They have a nasty bullpen when it's on. Like, is it still going through Houston? Are they still the favorites in this?
You got to take down the defending champs first, right? So to answer your question, a simple answer would be yes. But do I think the Houston Astros are the best team in the American League? I think you could argue otherwise, right? I really have concerns with Baltimore. I think the trickle effect of Felix Bautista's injury is going to prove very costly for this squad. It's one thing to lose a bullpen arm, but to lose that dominant of a player in the back of your bullpen. He was, before he got injured, he was like 3rd, 4th on the team in wins above replacement as the closer.
Doesn't give up hits.
It doesn't, that doesn't make sense. And so now you're pushing Yennier Cano to the closer role. They're kind of going to do more of a closer by committee type thing with Baltimore. They're already a team that, I know they got John Means now back too, but they're already a team that didn't have a ton of pitching depth. Now without Felix Bautista, I think it really puts a hole in that bullpen. So I'm concerned about Baltimore just because of the injury to Felix Bautista.
Yeah, and I like what you tweeted the other day about how, the Orioles built their way out of a rebuild and the Rangers bought their way out of a rebuild. And it's two different philosophies. And I guess in the long term, like between those two teams specifically, which one is going to be more sustainable? On the surface, it sounds like the Orioles, they have young, controllable guys, right? But you got to imagine that not every prospect they bring up, not every young player they bring up is going to be the next Gunnar Henderson or the next Adley Rutschman. But so what do you think of just about that, those two strategies of how Texas did it and how Baltimore got there too?
It's a great question. My answer would be neither, actually, because I believe there needs to be a balance between the two. Baltimore at some point is going to have to pay Adley Rutschman. Baltimore at some point is going to have to pay Gunnar Henderson, Grayson Rodriguez. There's going to come a time where these guys are going to be coming up on free agency. And so what Atlanta has done has provided a blueprint for sustainable success. They went out and extended Ozzie Albies. They went out and extended Ronald Acuna Jr., Matt Olson, Sean Murphy. They extended their guys long before they were going to even hit free agency. So Atlanta's provided a blueprint to allow sustainable success in Major League Baseball. The Dodgers, similarly, they have a combination of doing it, spending and developing their players in their minor leagues and signing international players. So Atlanta, Los Angeles, those are the two teams and the two organizations that do it the best. And the proof is in the pudding. Atlanta's, they win an NL East, 5, 6 times out of the last 7, 8 years. And similarly, the Dodgers have won 10 out of the last 11 National League West titles. So those two teams provide the blueprint. To answer your question, Baltimore is going to have to spend some money at some point. I don't think having the 28th, third lowest payroll in Major League Baseball is sustainable success. And similarly, Texas Rangers are going to have to find ways to develop players in their farm system because they're not going to be able to spend $280 million every single year.
Especially on, free agent pitching, which is what they've done, right? John Gray, Andrew Heaney, Max Scherzer was traded there. I mean, just adding from Jordan Montgomery, who just pitched tonight. And by the way, everybody's going to know this by now, but the Rangers took game 1 from Tampa Bay, who just did not play well. I was watching a little bit of it before when I was prepping for this. And back to the Braves point, I mean, if you're an agent negotiating with Alex Anthopoulos and the Braves, like, you got to be on your toes, because I don't know who Ronald Acuna's agent is, but that deal is looking like a steal for Atlanta. And I think Albie's got like a very team-friendly contract too. Like, you got to be on your toes when you're negotiating with them. But I want to touch on the Phillies real quick, because Aaron Nola's 12th in Baseball Reference WAR on the Phillies with a 2.1 Baseball Reference WAR on the Phillies. That's how deep this Phillies team is. He's 12th in WAR. And there's a lot of folks that think that they have a legit shot to, fly through this wild card series and regain their National League, regain as National League champions. But I do have the possible division series matchup between the Braves and Phillies circled. Do you too? Because that seems like it's going to be a must-watch baseball.
Yeah, Willie and I both agreed that that's kind of like our World Series before the World Series. We both have them in the second round matching up. And if we don't get that second round matchup, we will all have been cheated. I'm sorry, Miami. You had a great season. I love you, Jesus Luzardo, Yuri Perez, Sandy Alcantara, Jazz Chisholm. Great players. I hope another year is your year. But this is the year that we need to get Philly, Atlanta in that second round, because I think those are arguably the two best teams in baseball with respect to the Dodgers, with respect to the Orioles, Rays. I think those are the two teams that are most built to win a title and most built for the postseason.
I want to see Trey Turner go on one of those like those crazy homer rampant series where he's just, I mean, what was it, like 9 home runs in 10 games at one point, that second half, where he's just on fire. The billboard went up, right? He got the standing ovation, he put the billboards up, and then he just became another player. But is there anybody like that in either league who you're kind of like looking at as like either an X factor or like someone to look out for in terms of who could make a difference? What individual player do you see in this postseason?
I hate to say this because now I feel like I'm going on the bandwagon because of what's happening right now in Minnesota. But to my defense, I actually said this yesterday, and you can go back and find the receipts. But Royce Lewis is my X factor for the Minnesota Twins. Royce Lewis was coming into this postseason with nursing a hamstring injury. And Royce Lewis, once he was added to that lineup midseason for the Twins, they took off and ran away with the American League Central. And they ended up winning 90 games or close, damn near. So when Royce Lewis is in the lineup, Minnesota Twins can do some damage offensively. They have the pitching staff to be able to give them opportunities to win ball games. The problem for them is their inability to provide consistent offense. They have the highest strikeout percentage in baseball offensively. They just don't put the bat on the ball at a high enough clip to be able to score runs. However, when Royce Lewis is in the lineup, that offense completely changes. And if the Twins can get by this first round and get on to the ALDS and maybe even the ALCS, there's a guy named Byron Buxton that is hanging out there, and he's nursing an injury too, but maybe he can add something to that Twins lineup as well.
Are you concerned at all about the Dodgers pitching? I know that there's okay, so you are, because just to give some context for anybody listening, but like, Arias goes down. Kershaw was kind of on the shelf a little bit. He could still get outs. He still might be able to give you 5 innings in a postseason game. But there's some question. Bobby Miller is still young, right? They don't have Walker Buehler. There's some question marks even with the bullpen. So what do you see? I mean, because are they beatable? I mean, they got 100 wins again for like the 4th straight year. But it seems like the Dodgers, other than, aside from years past, they seem more vulnerable this time around.
We got to remember, too, that the Dodgers were hesitant this offseason to spend too much money, and a lot of people thought because they're going to find themselves in the Ohtani sweepstakes. Yeah. Well, now here we are in October, and they're the 2 seed, and they have a chance to really compete for a title, and it's looking a little bit bleak in that starting rotation. Let's say hypothetically it comes down to either a game 5 or a game 7 in the postseason, and you got to throw a starter out there to give yourself a chance to win. Are you confident in putting Clayton Kershaw out there, who has not had great postseason success? Probably not. Are you comfortable with putting Lance Lynn in there, who gave up 30 home runs this season and frankly has just been a shell of himself?
I think it was over 40.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of you. You're probably right. Bobby Miller, great arm. He's going to be an absolute stud. He's a rookie and has 0 postseason experience. So I have a lot of concerns when it comes to the Dodgers rotation, but I also have a lot of concerns when it comes to the Atlanta Braves rotation as well. Max Fried's coming off his injury with a blister, which shouldn't be a problem, but sometimes those blisters can linger a little bit. Charlie Morton, he's dealing with a finger issue. He's not going to play in the NL wildcard round. They're hoping to get him back. They have a bye for the wild card. They're not going to have him for the NLDS. They're hoping to get him back if they advance the NLCS. So the 2 betting favorites, Braves, Dodgers in the postseason to win the title, both those teams have a little bit of a injury issue when it comes to their starting rotation.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask about the Braves pitching too, but I think you nailed it there. And I do want to ask about some of the long layoffs that these teams are gonna have, Atlanta and the Dodgers and the teams in the American League as well. I think it's like 5 days before they're gonna even play a game. Um, and there's obviously off days with travel days in the postseason. Do you think that that is something that is gonna hurt them, or is more rest a beneficial um trait for these teams that win the division and the top two teams? Is that going to hurt them, the long layoff?
I think it depends on the team. I think it's very case by case. I think it's less about rest periods and it's more so about, for whatever reason, baseball has this weird thing of the best team in the regular season does not always hoist a trophy.
Yep.
The only team that I can really remember in recent history being the most dominant team in the regular season and then going on to win the whole thing is last year's Houston Astros. And then there was the 2018 Red Sox that beat the Dodgers in the World Series. Other than that, we got some San Francisco listeners. We can all agree that 10, 12, 14, Giants were not the best team in the league. 2019, the Washington Nationals, they were not the best team in the league. The 2021 Atlanta Braves, they were not the best team in the league either. So baseball has this weird way come postseason time that all you need is a really good starting rotation, some bullpen, dominant arms in the bullpen, and a streaky lineup, and that's going to get it done. It's about which team's going to get hot at the right time. So that's not to say that the Braves, Dodgers, Orioles, like just because they're a top seed, I'm not saying they're not going to hoist the trophy. Baseball just has a weird way of going about, its business.
Once you get in, man, the possibilities are endless. Do you like the expanded postseason format? Do you think that that's a good thing to get more markets involved? And I guess that's the pro argument to it as well, getting more markets involved and getting fan bases excited down the stretch to where otherwise maybe their team is out of a division and out of the top two wild card spots. But do you like the expanded postseason format, or do you kind of like how it was before?
No, I'm a fan of it. I know I'm in the minority when I say this. I've always been in favor of shortening the regular season to 120 games. And I get a lot of flack for that because a lot of people say, well, you're not a real baseball fan if you want less baseball. It's not that I want less baseball. It's that I want more meaningful games. I think 162 is just a bit too long. The reason I say that is I think what the expanded postseason has done is it has attracted more fans for longer time throughout the season. So this last trade deadline, when you include the teams at the top of the division, and there were about 7 teams in the American League and 7 teams in the National League, all fighting for wild card spots. So you had about 20 to 22, depending on if you counted like the Mets and the Padres, 20 to 22 teams that were in contention for a playoff spot in August. And so that means you have 22 out of 30 franchises and their fan bases still locked in and invested in the season. I think the viewership kind of speaks for itself. Fan attendance this year was up year over year by 30% or something crazy like that. It was the largest increase in 3 decades. So, the new rules are having an impact, and I think the expanded postseason has been a success.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So that's the postseason stuff that we'll get into. I do want to get into you and your career a little bit now. I see your tweets all the time. I've seen them for years, and you just seem like a pure baseball rat who kind of really lives and breathes the game. How did you get into baseball, and when did it kind of start becoming a passion for you?
No, I appreciate that. I just grew up in Redding, California, about 2-3 hours depending on traffic from San Francisco. I had 3 older brothers. I was the youngest 4. All of them played 3 sports. Played collegiate baseball. I kind of bounced around University of San Francisco for a year, pitched terribly, wound up at William Jessup just outside of Sacramento, and I actually got my start with sports media. Max Preps is located in El Dorado Hills, which is just outside of Sacramento, California. I worked with them part-time throughout college. Once college ended, I got a full-time job with Max Preps. And for those that don't know, CBS Sports owns Max Preps. So I just kind of slowly worked my way up the totem pole, got my foot in the door, social media, worked my way over a little bit more to the baseball side of things, podcast side of things. And now I kind of dip my toes in all the pools.
I was speaking of Max Preps. I mean, everybody goes on Max Preps and checks out their stats. I mean, I played all through high school, and my Max Preps page is nothing to write home about. But yours is. You had an
Oh
incredible
no.
high school career, and I checked the Max Preps. I can't even say that Max Preps page in preparation for this, and it's just a flat out stud. I'm gonna kind of embarrass you here with the
Oh
stats
geez.
here. Between your junior and senior year, you recorded an ERA of 2 in 27 appearances, 21 starts, 14 complete games. This might be a little bit off. 140 strikeouts and 128 innings. And we'll get to the hitting stuff in just a second. But solely on the pitching side of it, give me a scouting report on Danny Vietti. Let's see. What did you have cooking for you on the mound?
I'm glad you pulled up the good stats. If you look at my not my freshman, I guess I was a redshirt. If you look at my redshirt freshman stats in college, they would indicate that I was not as great of a pitcher as my high school stats indicate. I was low to mid 80s, never threw hard enough to get past collegiate baseball. I had a pretty good splitter that I was a big fish in a small pond in Reading. So, take that as you wish. You can run with whatever you want on that. So, up in Reading, with respect to those guys, a lot of good people up there, a lot of good coaches. The hitters up there did not know what a split fastball was. And so as long as I could get that thing over the plate, they could not touch it in high school ball. So that, I think, a lot of my success in high school was probably due to that split fastball.
Honestly, all you need in high school is 2 pitches and you could get by. And I'm the complete games really stand out. Like I'm sure pitching deep in the games is something you took pride in doing. Is part of you bummed out to, flip on a big league team and see that become like a rarity in this game? Because obviously teams have their reasons. They want to protect their guys. There's money involved. They don't want their pitchers facing a lineup for the third time or fourth time for that matter. But is it like disheartening, like, flipping on the TV and seeing, 5 inning outings from starting pitchers?
I'm not necessarily one of those old heads that says, baseball's in a bad place and I hate what baseball become or has become. I'm not that guy. What I will say is that there are certain organizations, San Francisco being one, that their fan bases have really been impacted in a negative way by this new analytical approach. San Francisco Giants fans have very little incentive to go to the ballpark anymore because whose jersey are you going to buy in San Francisco? It's not going to be Wilmer Flores. Sorry, it's not going to be Mike Yastrzemski. It's not going to be Casey Schmidt yet. It's not going to be even Patrick Bailey yet. I mean, your face of the franchise in San Francisco is probably Logan Webb, and Logan Webb is the only player in that or on that roster that is treated differently than the rest of the players. Logan Webb has earned the right to pitch deep in the ball games. He had 2 complete games this year. The rest of the pitching staff, they often do not pitch past the 6th inning because the organization doesn't believe in their starting pitchers pitching 3 times through the order. Unfortunately, the franchise and the fan base has really been hit hard because it's led to less of a passion from the fan base. Why go to the ballpark if you're a Giant fan if you don't know any of the players? It's very similar to what happens across the Bay in Oakland. The only difference is that San Francisco actually has a payroll, but they haven't been able to sign guys. They've been the bridesmaids and the Correa sweepstakes, the Aaron Judge sweepstakes, and so on. So I think analytics is good for baseball, but it's got to be a balance.
You just got a ton of more Giants fan followers, by the way, just for stating that alone. So shout out. From a hitting standpoint, high school, we're not done with that. Between 3 years, you hit 358, 3 homers, 47 RBIs, 17 doubles. I mean, we got to hear what the hitting profile is like. You told me a little bit about the scouting report on the mound. What could you do with the bat?
I recently went to the cages about a year ago. Well, here, the simple answer would be I tried hitting in college. They said absolutely no shot. Get your ass on the mound. So
PO, yeah.
PO, absolutely. But I recently went to the cages about a year ago. I sent that footage to my co-host, Will Middlebrooks. I wanted to get a former pro's, critiques. And he said, quote, he was impressed, unquote. So I'm running with that. I don't care if I never made it to the big leagues. I had a former big league player tell me he was impressed by my swing. So it works in slow pitch. It works in slow pitch.
There we go. We got to get the video too. So if you don't mind, no, I'm just kidding. So you mentioned the William Jessup in Rockland. It wasn't really that awful there either. But I mean, you mentioned that you couldn't get through college baseball, but I will say it wasn't awful looking at the stats. Why was it time to hang up the cleats and pursue sports media?
Couple different reasons. I had a great opportunity with Max Preps coming out of college. I technically have another couple years left eligibility wise still, which I'm not going to use. So unless I go back when I'm like 70 years old and retire and go back and play golf or something or some NAI school, which I think is the absolute dream. So it was more so the opportunity to kind of continue my sports media career. And we had such a magical year. My second year at Jessup, we were one game away from the NAI World Series. We ended up falling short. Our head coach that year is Jake McKinley. He wound up becoming the pitching coordinator for the Milwaukee Brewers. He's now the head coach at University of Nevada, Reno. He ended up leaving the year after I left. So a number of different reasons, but it was essentially more so had to do with just my passion and the opportunity I had in sports media.
Yeah, and being in Rockland and around that area for a period of time, and you're around the same age as Logan Webb. Did you ever get a sense of like, and maybe he wasn't up in the big leagues at this point, but did you ever get a sense of like what he meant to that community? I mean,
No.
I guess now, yeah, because he's pretty popular down there, huh?
Oh, he is now. I mean, he's everywhere. So Logan used to work out with us at Jessup when I was in college. And, we watched him. Like, he was super nice. Even now, he's just very competitive. Just a baseball lifer, really. Like that. He grew up
losing. Yep.
Hates losing. He's just a competitor. Our biggest thing with Logan though is like we're like, okay, Logan's gonna come practice with us. He's gonna throw some bullpens. Our catchers would catch his bullpens and whatever. It was before the guys went off to spring training, and so all of us being collegiate athletes, we're like, oh, we want to see what this kid has, and so we start watching his bullpen, and we're like, yeah, like he's got good stuff, but like none of us were that impressed, and so. For us, now we talk about in our group chat amongst our, my old college teammates, we're like, that same guy that we were all kind of like, decent stuff, now is like an all-star pitcher in Major League Baseball. So it was also February, so he probably was not in mid-season form. And it was really before Logan became a real pitcher. Like he was more of a thrower of the baseball, not a pitcher of the baseball. So he's come a long way and has evolved and matured a lot. But at the time, frankly, none of us were that impressed. Like we saw a guy with high velocity, but we're kind of like, oh yeah, he's just another arm. Now it's making us, bite our tongues a little bit because he's turned into quite the thrower.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I actually talked to the area scout that signed Harrison and all Kyle Harrison and also Logan Webb for a story for SI. And what he told me kind of lines up with what you said was he was kind of a thrower. He was more of a four-seam, 12-6 kind of guy on the mound. And then when the Giants' new regime took over, they kind of got him to lower his arm angle a little bit, became a big sinker baller, started using the slider a bit more to go along with the changeup. So definitely changed and evolved a lot as a pitcher for sure. CBS Sports, what are your duties? Take me through kind of a normal day. Let's say a normal day for you at CBS Sports, doing their social media, doing the other stuff that you do. Take me through your duties there.
Do my best because it can kind of change by day. But in a nutshell, you're watching mainly, you have a priority of watching whatever is on our sports network. So we have a cable channel and CBS Sports Network, and then obviously the local CBS channel, which is where you get your NFL football, your SEC football. If you're watching an Alabama game on CBS, that's our main priority, basically. So, unfortunately, CBS does not broadcast Major League Baseball, which puts me kind of in a little bit of a peculiar situation because that's where my passions lie. That's where my expertise is. So I actually am managing mostly our Instagram and TikTok pages. And the cool thing about what TikTok has become is that TikTok allows you to reach audiences that don't necessarily follow you. In other words, you can see videos from an account even though you don't follow them. Whereas on Instagram, you have to be following someone to find their content for the most part. So on TikTok, I've been able to kind of find these baseball niches with baseball stories and some cool, unique baseball content. It's allowed me to use my passions in baseball to project that onto TikTok. And we've won that hardware back there. We won an award for storytelling. That was a couple of years ago. So I have a great team that allow me to have my passion projects and do what I sought after to do in sports media. I have great management. Our company's fantastic. I know I sound like a commercial right now, but I personally think that we do as good of a job on social media as anybody in the business.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And do you find it tough to get people excited about baseball? What I mean by that, obviously, the diehards, the people that interact with you regularly, and the people that comment on your stuff or read your stuff, they're the ones that kind of religiously follow baseball. But do you find it tougher to kind of get into the casual fan a little bit more? I guess how does baseball get back to being? It still is, in my opinion, maybe more of a biased view of it, and I'm sure you feel the same way. I still think it's America's pastime, but maybe the ratings don't say the same thing. So do you see it being a little tougher to kind of scrape the surface of the casual baseball fan and trying to get them more involved a little bit?
Yes and no. Baseball has this really cool way of just having, there's so much dead time in baseball, for better or for worse. And so you get these weird, wacky moments, and so that's happening in the stands or in the outfield, or somebody's throwing something on the field, or somebody's getting tackled in the outfield because they jumped on the field, or whatever it might be. And so social media back in the 2010s, all social media was mainstream plays. So the one that comes to mind is like the Odell Beckham one-handed catch on, I think it was Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football, and social media was, oh my gosh, every media outlet in the world is sharing Odell Beckham's one-handed catch. Now social media, everybody's on it, and everybody has a platform, and there's so many eyeballs on social media that you have to find ways, unique ways to make your company stand out and be different. Baseball allows us to do that because there's not, when you compare it to our competitors, Bleacher Report, ESPN, Fox Sports, there's not as many eyes on a baseball game. So I can watch a Royals White Sox game on a random Thursday afternoon, and maybe something wacky comes along. And so it kind of plays into what I do well in my baseball passions. That's what social media has become. That's why I think CBS does such a good job in our team, is because ESPN and Bleacher Report, they do a phenomenal job. Don't get me wrong, but they have such a large following that they can share out a play and they're going to get millions of views. Us, if we share out a play, we have to find something completely different about that play in order for us to get the engagement that we want. So the OBJ catch, we can't just share that play. ESPN can share an OBJ catch and they're going to get millions of views. If we shared out the same catch, because ESPN and us share a lot of the same followers, we're not going to get a quarter of the engagement. So we have to find the fan in the background that's smoking a doobie behind Odell Beckham Jr. making a one-handed catch. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but we have to we have to zig while everybody else zags, if that makes sense.
I'll be watching football a little bit more closely now for the doobie in the first round.
We'll do it for you. We'll point it out on TikTok for you.
There you go. And if I see any of it, then I'll message you and say, look, this guy right here sitting at the 50-yard line is smoking a doobie. So
there you go. There you go.
Before we go, just a few general things. And this is as general as it gets and as vague as it gets. And I apologize, but I also don't apologize for asking this. Where's Ohtani going?
Oh man, I don't think anybody knows. I don't think Ohtani knows. I tend to lean on the side of, I still think he wants to be on the West Coast. When he came over from Japan, he wasn't really taking calls from the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Mets. He did have a meeting with the Cubs at one point. I don't know how serious it ever got. Because of those reasons, I'm still leaning and kind of wishing my own self that he stays on the West Coast for my own purposes, because I'm on West Coast time. I think the Mariners are definitely going to be involved. Dodgers are going to be involved. I think the Giants, with the firing of Gabe Kapler especially, I think they're setting themselves to basically be like, look, Shohei, here's a blank check. Tell us who you want as your manager, and let's get this going. The Giants are in dire need of a face of the franchise. Dire need. That fan base needs something to root for, especially with the departure of Brandon Crawford. So I think I'm leaning towards a West Coast team. Mariners, Giants, Dodgers. Maybe the Padres get involved. I think that's a little bit of a long shot at this point. We'll see. I think the Cubs could be a sneaky team, and the Red Sox could be sneaky as well.
In terms of the Giants, like a player manager, we haven't seen one in a long. I can't even say it with a straight face. We haven't seen one in a long time, but maybe just have Shohei manage the team. I mean, what do you have to lose?
Does he not do enough? Does he not do enough pitching wise and hitting wise? Has got to be the manager too.
Well, wouldn't it be easier? He gets to make his own decisions, but maybe not then.
I don't think the Angels' record would have been any worse had Shohei Ohtani been managing the team this year.
Yeah, I guess that's true. We'll see what happens. And I just saw that Phil Nevin's not going to. So there are some managerial. It's not just the Giants. As much as the Giants have some issues, there's going to be some openings in different places for sure. Real quick before we head out, I want you to plug your podcast because you and Will Middlebrooks do a really good job on your podcast. So I just want to praise you guys for doing a hell of a job. But tell us what kind of you guys talk about on your show and what the vibe's like over there.
Yeah, a lot of playoff content coming down the pipeline right now. A lot of player stories. Will has a ton of experience playing in the postseason. He's got a World Series ring, so I get to pick his brain. I kind of provide the nerdy analytics stats, and he provides the player experience. I think it provides a pretty good balance. He also has a Rolodex, a great Rolodex of player contacts. We get a lot of really good guests on there. You can follow us at Wake and Rake Pod, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. We have a really strong Instagram following, and you can listen to every episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever your favorite listening platform is, the Wake and Rake Podcast.
Wake and Rake Podcast, also part of the Believe Network. Danny, man, I really appreciate you spending some time here and taking the time out of a busy weekday to hop on the show. I really appreciate it, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is fun, Steven. Thanks for having me on, man. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. And everybody could go ahead and follow Danny. He's the social media manager on with CBS Sports. And of course, as we just mentioned, the Wake and Rake podcast with Will Middlebrooks. Go check that out. And of course, follow him on Twitter at Danny Vietti. Everybody could follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at RizzoCast. Go check it out. Off-season stuff, postseason stuff coming up. On our kind of partner podcast, the Shutdown Inning, we recently talked to Dakota Stilts Albritton from the Savannah Bananas. Funny story, we actually caught him after a game in Sacramento. They Bananas played in Sacramento, the lights went out, and my co-host Tyler and I ended up playing catch with him in the bullpen, in the Sacramento Rivercats bullpen, and we ended up catching up with him on the pod, so go check that out too. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and see you next time.